I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of this unique partnership with Alaska Public Media for the Alaska Weather Show on this Saturday, March 12th, 2022. If you ever have any questions, have an interesting report or photo to pass along, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. And always, if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide, you can go to weather.gov. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower right. That's a point-and-click map that you can go to and check on the forecast for anywhere in the country, along with any current watches, warnings, or advisory, and much more information. As of this Saturday afternoon, we have freeze warnings all the way down into the deep south, including the northern third of Florida, and this winter storm that has come up through the south and eastern part of the country there. Still in effect, winter storm warnings there for northern New England as we go into tonight. But for our area, not a lot of change from what I was telling you yesterday for the headlines. Clear skies throughout much of the interior, but some areas of gustier gap winds. And we're anticipating those winds to be continuing here tonight into the day on Sunday. I'll highlight some of the areas. We do have the time change coming ahead here tonight. Before you go to bed, set your clocks ahead 1 hour. Spring ahead 1 hour, or do that when you wake up tomorrow morning. Your cell phone takes care of that automatically, but if you don't, you're going to be out of sync with the rest of the world. And we are anticipating a solar disturbance, what we call a coronal mass ejection, is expected to arrive later on Sunday, and that could enhance the northern lights across Alaska. So keep your eyes peeled, because we are going to have some rather widespread clear skies. However, the moon is working its way toward full phase. It's a waxing gibbous moon, so we are gaining moonlight here each night, and the full moon in March is anticipated here on the evening of St. Patrick's Day on March 17th. Overall, though, the pattern for the state, especially the mainland, will be colder and drier as we go through the week ahead into next weekend, and that'll be centered especially over the southwestern portion of the state. Looking at the FAA webcams from this afternoon, Unalakleet is reporting clear skies, east winds gusting over 40 miles an hour with a temperature of 23 degrees. But notice those beautiful blue clear skies, so you'll be able to see the northern lights if they're out, but it'll be rather breezy. Over along the east end of the Alaska Range, also getting some gusty winds and some light snow still falling at Mentasta Pass, where the temperature is only 7 degrees. And we'll see some wintry weather hanging on across areas of the Alaska Range southward to along the northern Gulf Coast. But precipitation, though, should be on the light side. So again, there is the potential for some enhanced auroras here this weekend, especially as we go into Sunday night. Note, though, sunset time Sunday evening will be an hour later than it has been, so it'll be well after 9:30 before the sky gets good and dark. There is a potential for a Class 2 geomagnetic storm later on Sunday when the coronal mass ejection from the sun is expected to arrive. And we have full moon coming up Thursday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, at 11:18 p.m. Alaska time. Well, winds will be strongest Sunday morning down through Lower Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, as well as coming in some of the gap winds there, Bristol Bay, and also off the southwest coast, the YK deltas, and especially the southern half of Norton Sound. We're going to see some rather gusty east-northeast winds there. And up through the Mat-Su Valley, as you get up north of Anchorage, there could be some wind gusts 40-50 miles an hour as a result of these gap winds. Low pressure will be slowly tracking from the northern Pacific to the central Panhandle coast by Tuesday morning, and you can see there'll be some gustier winds during the afternoon there, especially mouth of Cook Inlet down through Shelikof Strait and in the lower portion of the Gulf, as well as along areas of southern coast of Norton Sound, the lower Yukon Delta on out toward coastal areas of the southwest. Looking at the satellite imagery, we can see that There's a pretty good curl in the clouds there, a little disturbance coming up through the lower Gulf. The main low pressure, though, is still well south of Kodiak Island at the bottom of your screen. That is the one that'll be gradually lifting northeastward toward the Panhandle coast by early Tuesday. Otherwise, a lot of clearing across the interior north of the Alaska Range through the Yukon Valley, and that will continue. Overall, a drier pattern setting up, especially for the western and interior areas of the state here in the week ahead. High pressure is situated along the Arctic coast into the Yukon Territory. We do have kind of a front that's going to stall out along the far south central coast, and then just lagging troughiness along the Alaska Peninsula back into the Aleutians. Later tonight, we'll have a high centered there over the Yukon Northwest Territories. Notice the pressure gradient, the isobars packed together a bit better there. The Alaska Range westward toward the lower Yukon Delta. That's why those winds will continue overnight into Sunday. Meanwhile, by Sunday afternoon, you can start to see the hints of that low. Pretty strong low, 958 low down there in the North Pacific. It'll be tracking northeastward slowly and weakening by the time it reaches the central Panhandle coast on Tuesday. But in the meantime, it's going to draw down some colder air from along the Arctic coast and north slope, and that colder air will be spreading south and westward throughout the week into next weekend. Quick check of temperatures. Sunday morning lows getting down below freezing most areas of the south and southeast. Highs Sunday afternoon still could reach the low mid-40s there, the southern and western outer portions of the Panhandle, but otherwise beginning to slip back below freezing there, especially Anchorage northward. Still 41 at Kodiak, but then notice Monday morning 14 below there at Glen Allen. And temperatures across much of the area, with the exception of maybe there in the southern outer areas of the Panhandle. Everybody else getting below freezing. Monday afternoon highs will be back down in the teens and 20s across the south central interior, though areas of the Panhandle could still see temperatures in the low and mid 40s. Notice colder temperatures will be settling into the north. Sunday morning lows in the teens, 20s, even some near 30s below Arctic Village on up toward Dead Horse. And as we go into Sunday afternoon, below zero temperatures, North Slope, Arctic coast, a few pockets there, east central areas, Yukon Flats, and overall trend toward colder temperatures. Monday morning, teens, 20s below, rather common. There could be a few isolated colder readings than that, and then daytime highs, single digits above and below zero. And as we go out along the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures will also be cooling down there as we get up through the Yukon and upper Kuskokwim Basin. Some areas getting below zero tonight. Highs Sunday afternoon should still be above freezing from around King Salmon and certainly Kodiak south and westward. Monday morning lows, though, starting to dip below zero there as you get up along areas like Aniak and up along the Kuskokwim and Yukon rivers. And temperatures cooling down to near freezing along the Alaska Peninsula. And then on Monday afternoon, high temperatures only in the teens in the central portions of the southwest interior, with readings still above freezing as you go out along the Alaska Peninsula and up into even the lower 40s there in the central and eastern Aleutians. Quick check, though. By next weekend, March 18th through the 22nd, the Climate Prediction Center 6 to 10 day temperature outlook has the coldest temperatures centered over southwest Alaska, along and west of the Alaska Range, including the lower Yukon Valley. That's a very strong correlation, so don't anticipate any mild spring weather. And with this pattern, it's going to mean the western and central part of the state will be drying out. It'll be a drier pattern, but areas of the southeast could see precipitation average, at least then, a little bit above normal.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time for your flying weather, and if you have a flight planned here Sunday into Monday, the main weather features continue to be high pressure that will be building into northwest Canada across the Yukon into the Northwest Territories. That's going to tighten the pressure gradient along the Alaska Range, extending westward out into Norton Sound, so we do expect to have some turbulence along that boundary. And then further south, there will be an area of low pressure slowly lifting northeastward out of the northern Pacific up toward the Panhandle, central Panhandle coast by Tuesday morning. So in between all of that, we are going to see clearer skies across much of the mainland. Still some IFR conditions, Mentasta Pass down through St. Elias, Wrangell area on over to the east side of Prince William Sound, and then also from St. Paul back out through the western portion of the Aleutians. Sunday afternoon, a lot of VFR conditions in the mainland on up through the Yukon River Valley, but again, that middle lower Yukon Valley could see some turbulence with the daytime mixing. And we'll see IFR conditions holding there just south of Prince William Sound out over the Gulf, and then again out over the lower Bering out through the western Aleutians. On Monday morning, you'll notice IFR conditions dropping in down around Utqiagvik. There along the Arctic coast, there's a core of colder air that's going to be dropping southward across the western, northern and western portions of the state. As that low works its way up into the Panhandle by Tuesday morning, the circulation around is going to pull down the cold air, especially into the mainland. And by Monday afternoon, we see IFR conditions there along the North Slope and Arctic coast, as well as out across the Gulf, up along areas of Yakutat onto the outer coastal areas of the Panhandle, and then also back toward the western Aleutians. Pass conditions on Sunday, look for VFR conditions at Anaktuvik as well as Adigan Pass, but if you're flying down there toward the Yukon River, it's going to be a bit bumpy. Lake Clark and Merrill, further south and west arm of the Alaska Range, should see MVFR conditions become VFR. As we round up through Rainy Pass as well as Windy Pass, we'll see a trend toward VFR conditions as well, but in some of the gaps there could be some gustier winds. And then heading eastward, Isabel should see MVFR conditions become VFR. And over along the Alcan border there, Mentasta Pass, IFR conditions to start Sunday morning becoming MVFR. And then further south and west, Tanita should see generally MVFR conditions on Sunday, as will Portage Pass, though the further west you go there from Portage Pass, you expect VFR conditions there along the western half there through the west entrance. And then finally, Chilkoot and White in the northern Panhandle should generally see MVFR conditions during the day on Sunday. And looking at the freezing levels, the surface freezing line extends from along the outer Panhandle coast to along through Kodiak Island across the Alaska Peninsula on up into the lower Bering. Overall, though, temperatures are going to be a bit colder here coming up next week compared to what we've enjoyed through much of the month of February. We do anticipate some isolated pockets of icing along the Gulf Coast between 3,000 and 10,000 feet, and then an area mainly north of the central Aleutians there in the lower Bering between 2,000 and 10,000 feet. The upper level jet stream winds along the British Columbia coast, there's a upper level ridge of high pressure. Strongest winds are on the east side of that, 120 knots there out over central Canada. And then as we look across Alaska, along the north slope, as well as coming in through the west, winds northwesterly there along the northwest coast, 65 knots, and then more northeasterly winds, 50 to 60 knots as you get offshore toward St. Matthew. And dropping down to 9,000 feet, we see winds along the Gulf Coast upwards to 40 knots, and ahead of that low pressure way down yet in the North Pacific. And then generally an easterly flow from the middle and lower Yukon Valley out over the northern portion of the Bering Sea, 40 to 50 knots, and bringing it down to 3,000 feet. We see high pressure centered there, eastern Russia, another core out over northwest Canada, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and then that low lifting up into the Gulf. We see the winds rather widespread in a counterclockwise circulation there in the Gulf of 40 to near 50 knots. Also an area of 50-knot winds there in the lower Yukon Valley Delta region extending out toward St. Matthew. So that's where we expect to find the greatest threat of turbulence. Surface to 3,000 feet, St. Matthew and St. Lawrence. Surface to 4,000 feet across the lower middle Yukon River as you move into the mainland. And then an area of surface to 4,000 foot turbulence around Kodiak Island, especially along there through Shelikof Strait. So if you have a chance to get out, if the weather's good for you, have a safe flight as we round out the weekend.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. Gold connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time, compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, the salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and we start with the sea ice edge across the Arctic coast into the Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait. We have cold air in place. That's going to be the case. In fact, we're going to see temperatures trending colder as we go through the upcoming week into next weekend. So there'll be plenty of cold air to maintain and make ice. So any polynyas there will have a tendency to want to refreeze it with time. There'll be a little breezier conditions coming down along the northwest coast as we get into Monday and Tuesday. Across the west and southwest coast, the ice is going to have a tendency to still want to drift a bit south and west, as winds will still be in excess of 20 to near 30 knots out of the northeast as we go through the day on Sunday, and maybe shifting a little more northwesterly by Monday. Nevertheless, here for the southeast panhandle areas, the inner channels, the lower south end, southeast winds 25 knots, waves maybe 5 feet. As we go up the mid and upper channels, Lynn Canal, we are looking at 25 to 35 knot winds out of the north, strongest there through Lynn Canal, and look for southeast to east winds 25 to as high as 35 knots there between Sitka and Gustavus. Waves generally in the 9 to 11 foot range. Monday, we'll see some stronger winds as the low approaches the coast. We expect winds to pick up from the south along the outer Gulf Coast there, 30-35 knots. Waves in excess of 20 feet, especially there Sitka southward. The inner channels will see winds southeasterly there at Dixon Entrance, 30 knots, but out of the northwest and north, 20 to 30 knots with some gusts to 35 knots there mid-channels. And then as we go through the northwestern Gulf, winds on Sunday will be out of the northeast around 35 knots off of the Kenai Peninsula, as high as 40 knots through the lower end and entrance of Cook Inlet, extending down into Shelikof Strait between Kodiak Island and the mainland. And then on Monday, winds maybe not quite as strong, still though out of the northeast around 25 knots there in the open waters of the Gulf off of the Kenai, 15 knots from the north there at Prince William Sound, and northwesterly around 25 knots at the entrance of Cook Inlet, with waves as high as maybe 9 feet there. For Sunday, Kodiak Island will see strongest winds there, Shelikof Strait, some channeling northeasterly winds through there, otherwise 30 to 35 knot northeasterly winds south of Kodiak Island, and then across the way in the Bering from Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay. We're looking at winds out of the northeast at 20 to 25 knots. Monday, winds become more northerly across Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, anywhere from around 20, but generally 25 to near 30 knots. And winds become a little lighter as you get out toward the end of the peninsula there, 15 knots out of the northeast there north of Cold Bay. The Aleutians relatively quiet, especially the eastern Aleutians. Variable winds 10 to 15 knots on Sunday. Waves maybe 5 to 7 feet on the on the Bering side, and maybe 8 to 10 feet on the Pacific side. And by Monday, we look at generally east winds around 15 knots over the eastern Aleutians on Monday, and they'll turn a little more to the northeast and north from the central Aleutians into the western Aleutians. Along the southwest and west central coast, including Norton Sound, winds will still be out of the northeast at about 25 to 30 knots, so the ice is going to tend to want to still drift a bit south and westward. For Monday, winds turn a little more toward the north, even northwest a bit at 20 to maybe as high as 30 knots there south of St. Lawrence Island, so the ice still wanting to press a little bit southward. Across the Arctic coast, winds will be southwest to westerly around 15 knots. Otherwise, a bit of a mix there as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea, but turning northeasterly there on the west side of the Seward Peninsula. And for Monday, you're going to get a push of some colder air arriving from the north, and that's going to help turn winds more northwest to northerly there along the Arctic coast, as well as dropping down through the lower Chukchi Sea, picking up 20 to 25 knots there and accelerating to 30 knots through the Bering Strait on the north side of St. Lawrence. Quick check overnight into early Sunday morning. High pressure situated over northwest Canada, the Yukon. That's going to keep the pressure gradient up over the Alaska Range westward to Norton Sound and off the southwest coast, the lower YK deltas. And then as we go into the day on Sunday, low pressure lifting out of the North Pacific will have aim toward the central portions of the Panhandle coast by early Tuesday morning. Otherwise, look for generally clearer skies across much of the interior Sunday into early Monday. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to set your clocks ahead 1 hour before bed tonight.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.